Hello everyone, this is Namranan, and today we will be doing another video talking about Monotype Premier League 12, this time Week 3. So, finally, after 3 weeks of tournament gameplay, we do have usage sheet, or a usage stats sheet. Now, unfortunately, it is going to spoil some of the stuff that we'll probably see this week, but I mean, the bigger surprise is, to be honest, to see how those games go. So, obviously, biggest spoiler is that bug probably gets used this week, because I don't think it was used the past 2 weeks. But yeah, bug does lose the match this week, but regardless of that, what we see here is roughly around the same stuff that we saw last time. Which would be... we're gonna ignore this stuff over here. We're just gonna look at this stuff over here because I think this is a byproduct. But as you can clearly see here, steel is the most used stuff, is the most used type in the metagame, as well as the dragon. Dark sporting a very good win rate with the amount of games that have been put in. Flying is actually very severely underperforming this tournament, which is actually really surprising to see. So. But it is probably due to the fact that a lot of people have been building to make sure that they don't lose to stallier flying builds, especially after that infamous game between Royal Reloaded and Pro 1. So they are probably trying to make sure that at the very least they can at least try to break those flying cores so that flying cannot do the things that it does. But yeah, water and ground seem to be doing relatively well as well. Fairy not doing as well as it did in the previous tournament, but still doing pretty decent. And yeah, so far the types that haven't been used yet are electric, grass, ice, normal, psychic, and rock, which is about standard fare, I would say. But with that being said, nothing too out of the ordinary in terms of these usage sheets. I definitely do think the amount of poison we have seen is definitely a bit unusual, but we have seen a couple of poison builds actually work pretty well, so it is nice to see that poison is doing okay in this tournament setting, but it still has a long way to go before it becomes a truly top-tier type. But yeah, let's look at some of the, we're going to look at a top 5 usage Pokemon usage for each type and have a little discussion about that. So for Dark, we can see that obviously Hisuian Samurott is probably one of the most important mons on the type, but it actually isn't as omnipresent as you would think. It has a very high win rate for the games that it's been brought in, but is shockingly not as omnipresent as I thought it would be, considering how powerful its spikes stacking nature is. It appears that a lot of teams have been using a lot less of the spike stacking and have been using more creative Tinglu sets to try and make a small opening and then allow their super strong breakers to do what they can. And yeah, we can see that through the amount of Vidal usage and Darkrai usage. Greninja, shockingly, still seeing a lot of usage despite its quote-unquote fall-off. And Mandibuzz and Meowscarada in particular, have been brought on every single team, which is not surprising. And as I said before, we did see a lot of Roaring Moon last week, but it doesn't seem to be performing that well. But yeah, all in all, Dark seems to be doing around a lot of the same stuff. The only new, somewhat newish thing that we've seen is the rise of Battle Bond Greninja with a multitude of sets. We've seen Choice Specs, we've seen Life Orb. It's very interesting to see that ability of Greninja's is being used. But Protean is still seeing a lot of usage as well, so it seems like Greninja just has a little bit more options in its toolkit now instead of what it had before. Which is nice to see, since Greninja was falling off. Next we have Dragon. Dragon is doing pretty much the same thing it's always done. Archaludon, most used Pokemon, as well as Hisuian Goodra. The double steals are just too good to pass up. But we're actually seeing a lot of variety here, which is more than usual for Dragon, since it usually typically tends to run the same couple of Pokemon. Not like Fire, but it's definitely definitely like an over-centralizing amount of Pokemon that he uses, and you can still see that through the Dragon Ball and Latios usage, but you don't see a lot of Raging Bolt, which is shocking, because a lot of people were saying going into this tournament that Raging Bolt would be one of the top priority bonds in this tournament, but it does not seem to be the case, as there are a lot of Dragon teams that have not been using Raging Bolt, have been opting for other special attackers instead, such as Latios, for example, as well as Hydreigon. Now that being said, Raging Bolt is still a pretty powerful bond on the type, but it doesn't seem to be as omnipresent as people thought it would be. And there are a smattering of other bonds that have been used on Dragon as well. Garchomp actually seeing a shockingly low usage. Actually, almost as low as Hydreigon's, which is kind of crazy. It's actually higher than Hydreigon's. Or no, it's the same amount. It's the same amount. But yeah, it is very interesting to see that. And like I said before, Latios is seeing a lot of usage, even if it hasn't been winning its games. But yeah, just very interesting to see this version of Dragon. And again, Hydreigon is probably a tech for anti-dark matchups. Next up we have, I think Flying was top 5? Yeah, Flying was top 5. Flying sees a lot of different usage of mons. We see Gliscor and Corviknight most used, with a Skarmory right there, right behind it, and Amorous as well. Everything else has been relatively somewhat evenish usage. But yeah, as you know, Flying has not been doing very well. I mean, 3 and 12 is not very good for a type that's supposed to be top tier. So it's definitely looking not great for, or sorry, 3 out of 12 is not a good win rate for a type. But yeah, it's not looking good for Flying, but maybe we'll see a tech brought in one of the future weeks. Next we have Ground, which I think was part of the top 5, and then it was Steel. Ground, pretty much a lot of the same stuff. Clodsire is the most used mon on Ground, and then the other actors are there as well. Great Tusk making a nice cameo appearance, and we do see the one team that was relatively unusual that did win its game. The Ursaluna team. Then we have Steel and Water. Water is... Actually, Ground was not top 5, but Water is definitely looking good. Sui and Samura dominating the water usage charts, along with Toxapex. Because Hazard Stack is just that strong. But it would take an entire video to talk about all the different types of archetypes we've been seeing in SV Monotype. So, just make things brief. Water has like several archetypes you can use. We've seen Webs with the Araquanid. We've seen Empoleon balance teams be used a lot as well. We've seen a lot of Keldeo teams, or not a lot, but we've seen teams that use Keldeo. We've seen Ogerpon Wellspring teams. We've seen Rain teams. We've seen Spike stacking. We've seen Stall. There's just a lot of viable stuff you can do with Water, and it's just kind of a type that can almost do it all. Keyword being almost, because if it could do it all, something would probably have to get banned on the type. But Water is completely balanced as a type. And it's a jack of all trades. Can't really say it's not a master of none, because it's very good at balance, but the issue is that it just kind of does... It kind of does everything, but it doesn't super duper excel at anything. It doesn't have any truly insane meta-defining Pokemon outside of Fusien and Samura, obviously. But it lacks that really scary threat that everyone wants to try and prepare for. And that's probably why Water does do well in these tournaments, is because it doesn't really have that massive amount of threat values. Like, if you have a Water Resist, you'll typically be fine. But what if that Water Resist happens to be Greninja with a Grass Knot? What if it happens to be Primarina who could just overpower your Water Resist with a very strong Fairy move? It's stuff like that that kind of just keeps Water as a type very scary. To always keep in the back of your mind. But yeah. Next we have Steel. Steel's actually relatively undervaried this tournament. which is not super surprising since it does follow the same game plan, and as I said before, Caesar has been seeing a ton of usage. More than it usually did, or more than it did in MWP for sure, because we saw a lot more Hisuian Gudra and other Pokemon on Steel and MWP, but we've been seeing a lot of Caesar recently, and I'm kind of curious as to why that is. We'll probably figure that out in the mid-season after week 4, but yeah, it'll be very interesting to figure out what is exactly going on here in this aspect of Steel. Corviknight also doesn't seem to be very popular this time around. Corviknight was actually decently popular in FWP, but it doesn't seem to be the case now. But yeah, it's the same couple of Pokemon, Archaludon, Gholdengo, Heatran, and Iron Treads just being a very good immunity core. And then they just kind of add on whatever you want. Like, if you want Hazard Stack, you can put on Skarmory. If you want more offensive power, you can go Caesar. If you want more defensive Snowball potential, you can go Corviknight or Hisuian Gudra. Like, the list goes on. But yeah, very undervaried type this time around. And yeah, that'll be it for the usage stats. So let's get on to the games. So first game we'll have is Luisin versus seraphz. Luisin bringing a flying team, and seraphz bringing a standard fire team with the same 6 Pokemon. Luisin's team is looking to be a relatively standard flying team as well, with Gliscor, Landorus, and the Tornadus T, Corviknight, and Articuno combo, but there's not really much to say about either team. It's going to be interesting to see what sets are brought, though, because Fire can run a large variety of sets on excuse me, sorry, on Volcarona and Ogerpon Wellspring, or not Ogerpon Wellspring, Ogerpon Hearthflame, but yeah, let's just see how this goes. So, we lead off with Landorus on Luisin's side as we instantly set the Sun on the Fire team. We see a Focus Blast fail to connect on the Heatran prediction as we do swap out into Tornadus. Tornadus will be taking the Sun-powered Magnustorm, breaking Heatran's Balloon, which is going to be really bad for it once the Landorus comes back in. As now, I'm pretty sure there are no ground resists for seraphz to deal with, so Landorus can kind of just do whatever it wants. As we do see Gliscor click Earthquake, reducing Ceruledge to 2% HP, not quite consuming its Focus Sash, but the follow-up Toxic will be enough to KO it. As we do see Volcarona come out, the Toxic going through on it as well, as that will put Volcarona on a timer, and won't allow it to do most of the nonsense that Volcarona usually is allowed to do. As the Protect fails to protect against anything, as seraphz gets up another Quiver Dance, we see a Flamethrower KO the Corviknight, as Volcarona is going to slowly succumb to the Toxic Poison. Gliscor is going to come out again and use Protect to try and stall out a move, but unfortunately seraphz predicts that and gets a Morning Sun HP heal, as we see another Flamethrower likely come out from the Volcarona, this time connecting onto Articuno, who is able to take 1 hit. It will be sacked to the Volcarona, as Volcarona is just too scary to be swapped into right now. As we'll probably see, we'll see a swap out into Ninetales, and Ninetales will likely Healing Wish here and probably bring Volcarona back up to full once it does its thing here. As we do see the Earthquake used by the Gliscor, and yep, there goes the Healing Wish. And we're going to see that probably go straight to Volcarona. No, he will store it this time around, as he tries to go for the KO on Gliscor, but unfortunately does not go through. We'll probably see a Protect. No Sword Stance prediction by seraphz here, which is very unfortunate. As we do see another Ivy Cudgel go through and get the KO on Gliscor. Tornadus coming in now. Bleakwind Storm fortunately connecting, as Volcarona will now be fully healed by the Healing Wish, and Heatran will come in. Heatran perfectly checking the Tornadus, as it can't really do much to it. Magma Storm coming through on the Tornadus, as it's now reduced to 12% HP. Luisin still continuing to use Bleakwind Storm, possibly trying to not let Volcarona in for free, as Heatran is staying in. Fortunately, it is slowed, so now Earth Power easily overpowers it. As we do see the Sucker Punch come out from seraphz to try and reduce the amount of damage he can take from Earth Power. Fortunately, Cinderace does survive, as we do see the Pyro Ball come out. Healing Wish is used by Enamorus, as Luisin is down to his last Pokemon. Cinderace using Pyro Ball again. Their lower Landorus to low HP, and it looks like seraphz might get W here. Oh, never mind. Landorus has Rock Slide specifically for the Volcarona, and just like that, seraphz falls and Luisin wins. It's actually very crazy to see, but Fire is actually a notably good matchup against Flying, because Flying doesn't really have that many good fire resists outside of Moltres, and a couple of other Pokemon as well. But yeah, without Moltres or another good fire resist, the Flying can just get absolutely pummeled by Fire's offensive onslaught, as you could clearly see here. But Luisin was able to play around that, and even with some hacks on his side, by missing the Focus Blast on Heatran early, he was still able to pull this victory through. Some solid gameplay, and very good usage of his Gliscor as well, forcing out the Ninetales early, and putting Volcarona on a relatively rough timer. So, very well played by Luisin, and let's move on to the next match. Next we have Kev versus Chaitanya. Feels like I'm going back in time seeing this matchup. But we do see Flying versus Fairy. Chaitanya opting for a Clefable Fairy team, which is something we haven't seen yet in this tournament. And Kev is opting for a Double Steel Bird Flying Core with Zapdos as well. So, not much to say about either team combo, but I am interested to see what set this Clefable is using, because Clefable on Fairy has quite a few sets that it can use. I've seen Calm Mind, I've seen regular Life Orb All-Out Attacker, I've seen Babiri Berry sets used to counter Caesar specifically, but we do not know for sure what set this one is going to use. So, I can't wait to find out. Hopefully it doesn't get one-shot, as we do see Clefable lead into the Gliscor. Knockoff is used, so it looks like it may be a utility set. Yeah, as we do see the Rocky Helmet go through it. Yeah, so Clefable is going to be using its rocks, which it does have access to. As Moonblast will come out against the Gliscor. Enamorus is going to be put in, fortunately taking a knockoff and losing its Expert Belt, but it doesn't seem like Expert Belt would be that much of a problem for it to lose, as the Moonblast does come through and do a decent amount of damage to Gliscor, lowering its special attack once again. Gliscor is going to use Protect on the subsequent Moonblast, as it will keep healing it quite a bit with its Toxic Orb. Kev is switching out into Corviknight to take a Moonblast from Chaitanya's Enamorus again, as the Mystical Fire comes out on Chaitanya's side to try and deal with the Corviknight, but unfortunately, Kev actually may have made an error, but no, it looks like Chaitanya is not going to try and take advantage of the evasiveness buff, as Kev will get rid of those rocks successfully and swap out into Skarmory, looking to try and stop the Azumarill from doing what it wants to do, but unfortunately Azumarill will get to full HP. Rocky Helmet will chip Skarmory quite a bit, but the follow-up Aqua Jet will make sure that Skarmory cannot get back up, as we do see a Dragonite with Thunder Punch coming out to KO the Azumarill and remove it from the game. Clefable once again setting up its Stealth Rocks, as Chaitanya swaps back into Enamorus. Gliscor using Swords Dance on the predicted switch, as we do see a Protect come out from Kev, blocking a Moonblast from Chaitanya, as Chaitanya does keep trying to use Moonblast on the Gliscor, trying to reduce its HP as much as possible. Knockoff not doing a ton of damage to Enamorus, but putting it at a dangerously low HP, as we do see Chaitanya get the Protect read, and it gets his Iron Valiant in, as we do see Iron Valiant use the Thunderbolt. Thunderbolt not hitting Gliscor, but the Ice Punch will, and that gets Gliscor KO'd, as we do see Chaitanya swap into Enamorus to predict Kev's Enamorus using Earth Power perfectly. Mystical Fire will be used. As we do see Corviknight used Roost to try and heal itself back up to full HP. Defog is once again used to remove the rocks, as Ironhead will come out against Clefable, not doing a ton of damage. But we do see Klefki coming in now, and we're going to probably see some screens get put up. As the Reflect goes through, Roost is used again by Kev to keep Corviknight at full HP as he U-turns out. Zapdos now coming in to the Klefki. Klefki not really going to be able to do much to the Zapdos, as Zapdos will be using Substitute. We see a Hurricane come through on Zapdos as the Moonlight from a Clefable will go through. Discharge is used as Stealth Rocks goes back up. The Stealth Rocks in this matchup are actually very helpful, and Clefable is actually one of the few mons that can use Stealth Rock on Fairy. So it's actually very useful. The other one being the Paradox Jigglypuff form, I'm trying to remember what the name of it is, Screamtail. Yeah, that's the only other mon that uses Stealth Rock, but Clefable is just a more solid mon than Screamtail, so that makes a lot of sense. Try to use this instead, as we do see Corviknight get the lucky hacks on Clefable and KO it with Ironhead and Paralysis combo, as we do see Chaitanya get a follow-up Paralysis with the Thunderbolt on Iron Valiant. That could be very brutal for Corviknight to deal with later. As without an electric immunity, Kev's team is going to fall victim to a lot of Thunderbolt and Ice Punch spam, as we do see the Enamorous on Kev's side come out again and get a KO on Chaitanya's Enamorous. However, Fluttermane now going to be brutal as it lays out a critical hit Thunderbolt that brings down Corviknight. The crit doesn't really matter because the 2-hit KO will still go through, but it is still very sad to see nonetheless, as Dragonite will start to use its Dragon Dance, getting paralyzed in the process, as Iron Valiant will come in. Once again, another Paralysis coming through, Chaitanya getting very good hacks. 3 Paralysis in a row! And that will be the end of Dragonite there, as Kev will put in Enamorous and try to finish off this game. But unfortunately, Klefki will put up... Okay, never mind. Klefki used a Thunder Wave instead. But Klefki doesn't really need to do much, as the Thunder Wave plus Light Screen combo will make sure that Fluttermane, who already is very specially bulky, will not perish, and that will be the game, as Chaitanya does manage to win this match. Very unfortunate hacks on the side of Kev, as the triple Paralysis combo made it impossible for his Dragonite to even remotely try and do anything. But sadly, that is the way Pokemon is sometimes. So well played to both sides, but now we will move on to the next match, as ImprobableBlob faces off against Masskeauuu with his Steel team featuring Hisui and Goodra, goes against Masskeauu's relatively standard Sand team. Iron Treads leading off the match with his balloon being intact, as we do see the knockoff onto Great Tusk removing its Choice Scarf. That is a very important thing to remove for Steel specifically. As we now see, Great Tusk also removes Skarmory's Rocky Helmet, so 2 Rocky Helmets were removed. Heavy Slam is used by Goodra, but Mamoswine is also very heavy, so it will not do as much damage as ImprobableBlob would have liked. As we see the Ice Blow Crash do a decent amount of damage to Skarmory. We see them double switch into each other, as Iron Treads faces off against Landorus. Landorus obviously does not want to face the Iron Treads, especially with Ice Spinner, so Ice Spinner instead lands on the Hippowdon, who eject buttons into Landorus, as now the Landorus is sets gravity, and now here comes Excadrill. Excadrill will get the KO onto Skarmory, and now there's a lack of flying immunity. Iron Treads cannot activate its balloon, but without the sand, it does not outspeed, or Iron Treads will outspeed the Excadrill, but Excadrill cannot outspeed the Iron Treads. As we do see Hippowdon heal itself to full, or to near full, as we see both sides swap out their Pokemon for their Steel grounds. Both sides swapping out again to Masskeauuu going into Hippowdon as he goes into Mamoswine. Heatran using the Lava Plume to get the KO on the Mamoswine, as Gravity is used by Landorus again. Landorus not suffering from a burn this time around, but the Earth Power will still be able to 2-hit KO Goodra due to Landorus's very, very powerful nature. Iron Treads coming out and still outspeeding Landers, as we do see it use Ice Spinner on Powdon, who is able to take it relatively well. Powdon clicking Slack off and once again healing itself to a relatively good HP. Archaludon opting to use Draco Meteor, but coming up short on the KO, as we do see Iron Treads come back out. Slack off once again used by the Powdon to heal it to full. Iron Treads is going to try and defeat the Powdon, but Powdon is just too strong, or too bulky, as it once again slacks off. It's definitely running out of slack off BP, it has like 3 left. As Gholdengo will now come out and Shadow Ball is used, but ImprobableBlob swaps out to put Heatran into the Clodsire. As Clodsire uses Recover to heal itself to full. Heatran putting down the Lava Plume and a burn going off, which will make it harder for Hippowdon to do very good retaliatory damage to ImprobableBlob Steel types, which could be very vital for something like Gholdengo. But Gholdengo uses Shadow Ball on the Clodsire, lowering its special defense, but still choosing to swap out. Earth Clodsire uses an Earthquake, but onto no target, as Heatran's balloon protects it from the Earthquake. Lava Plumes being slammed onto the Clodsire, and Clodsire takes respectable damage due to the special defense drop, as it keeps spamming Recover in hopes to keep itself healthy. However, a Spike is put down and a burn is laid down, as Heatran does get that onto the Clodsire. Clodsire now KO'd, and Great Tusk coming in. Iron Treads now comes in, but as we mentioned before, without the balloon, it's not very difficult to figure out who's going to switch into. So the close combat is used to KO. Gholdengo now coming in and getting the KO onto Landorus. Gholdengo looking to be the Choice Scarf set as well. We now see Archaludon come in and get instantly one-hit KO'd by the Earthquake as Heatran comes in. Excadrill now very obviously banned because regular Excadrill does not KO Archaludon at that HP unless it crits. Masskeauuu now swapping into Great Tusk, as Great Tusk now gets KO'd by the Lava Plume. Excadrill goes in, but the Rock Slide will fail to connect as the Lava Plume will KO the Excadrill, and just like that, the match is now over. And ImprobableBlob winning an unlikely matchup against a Gravity ground team. Very well played by ImprobableBlob. This is a very hard matchup to pilot as the Steel user, as well, once Landorus puts down Gravity, it's very hard for your Pokemon to do anything of note, but with the power of Hisui, Goodra, and Skarmory on his team, he had enough defensive pressure to prevent the onslaught of Masskeauu's powerful ground types, and it allowed him to get that victory. So well played to ImprobableBlob, but nothing of note for either team, by the way. All the teams were relatively standard. So with that being said, let's move on to the next match, which will be Aesir Iggy versus DugZa. And this is the bug match we were talking about, and I think now we know why Bug lost. As even with the webs and Kleavor, this is still a relatively rough matchup for Bug to win. So let's see how this match goes. So we see the instant Kleavor lead, Stone Axe instantly setting those Stealth Rocks. As we do see the Bitter Blade come out as well. Araquanid now coming in to take the Bitter Blade from the Sarah Ledge, as Poltergeist is used. Poltergeist doing a hefty 52% damage and revealing the heavy duty boots on the Araquanid, as Ogerpon Hearthflame comes out. Caesar coming out now to act as a sack for the Ivy Cudgel. Kleavor now comes in to threaten again, as Ninetales will most likely get KO'd by the Stone Axe. The sun is now up, Heatran is now in. What will DugZa do here? He will Stone Axe again and pop the Heatran's balloon. Now Fortress is coming in, as we do see the body press come through, but unfortunately Volcarona will not only just get the flame body, but also greatly tank the body press. As we now see DugZa go into Araquanid, who will likely... Oh, DugZa instead goes into Fortress to try and wear down the amount of sun turns it would appear. As Low Kicks comes in, first impression doing a decent amount of damage, but not quite enough to get the KO on Volcarona as he gets a special attack buff and a Fiery Dance. Yeah, and it seems like Volcarona will just run away with the game here, as Volcarona under Sun is just too strong for a bug to deal with, especially without Cleavor. So yeah, that will be that. Not really much to say. Fire is just that good against Bug, especially with Volcarona. This matchup kind of depends on whoever can get Volcarona Snowball. Well, not even, because if Bug gets Volcarona going, Fire has a lot of ways to stop it, with specifically Heatran. So it is very, very unfortunate that DugZa would lose here. But sadly, that is just how strong of a matchup this is. But hey, we've seen that rough matchups can be played around, so it's not completely... wasn't completely doomed from the match preview, but it is definitely a rough matchup for DugZa trying to play, so unfortunate. Well, let's move on to the next game, as we see Scarfire versus Dieu Amphibien. We see Scarfire using a standard ground team, or sand ground team, with Dieu Amphibien opting for a Empoleon Spikes Offense water team, with featuring Rotom Wash, which is very interesting. I think we've seen this team before, but it definitely will be interesting to see how this team plays out again. Now, Dieu Amphibien would seemingly have the favorable type matchup here, but I'm not sure if maybe Scarfire has some secret tech about this. But yes, we do see the flip turn from Swampert immediately occur as it goes into Greninja immediately. Greninja being Protean and not Battle Bond. Smackdown is used by the Mamoswine, but it will not hit anything as the Toxapex comes in. Earthquake is used by Scarfire, but Dieu Amphibien perfectly predicts it and is able to go into his Rotom for free. Rotom now using Substitute. It looks like it may be the sub-Nasty Plot set. As we do see, yeah, the Nasty Plot does go through. Gravity is used by the Landorus, as now Gravity actually likes to that Hydro Pump Candy for remotely miss. So this is actually unideal, but Stored Power is used instead, as Escadrille will now come out. Escadrille is still likely being faster, and Dieu Amphibien does not want to take the risk of dealing with that, so Toxapex will perish, as we do see Greninja come in. Clodsire looking to try and take a Surf, but unfortunately it will instead take an Ice Beam, as it will get KO'd by the Greninja, as Great Tusk now comes in, using its close combat to get a KO on the Empoleon. Empoleon falling, and Swampert now coming in to take its place, as Hippowdon is looking to take a flip turn and get some chip damage on Swampert. Hippowdon swapping into Mamoswine to try and take the Ice Beam, but now without his water ability, Dieu Amphibien can just use Surf. So yeah, there we go. And the KO onto Greninja is secured by the Scarf Iron Treads. Flip Turn is used on the Hippowdon, as Hippowdon gets lowered again, but once again, Swampert has now brought itself to half HP. Samurott, Hisuian Samurott, it does get the KO onto Hippowdon, as Great Tusk comes back in, getting the KO onto Samurott with close combat. Close combat is used again, this time getting the KO onto Swampert. And close combat will be used again to get Rotom very low, as we do see the Substitute. Close combat is used again. Stored Power not doing enough damage to the Great Tusk, and just like that, Scarfire does win in the unlikely matchup. Yeah, this just shows the power of Great Tusk in general, though, as Great Tusk just completely is able to shut down a lot of the bonds on water, especially since most of them are weak to fighting. But that's just the nature of it having a good fighting typing. It just allows it to hit things that normally ground teams would have a rough time getting to hit relatively effectively due to the nature of the water type just being very resistant to most stuff. So being able to hit these three Pokemon in general, Hisuian Samurott, Napoleon, and Greninja, was really helpful, especially since he offered Okos onto pretty much all of them, leaving Duotomia with only 3 mons to try and make work, and Rotom has to get going. So there's too much pressure on his defensive Pokemon, and his offensive Pokemon were just too easily countered by Great Tusk's abilities. So yeah, well played to Scarfire for maneuvering this matchup very well. Even with losing the Clodsire early, it still looked like Scarfire had the match completely under control. So well played, and now let's move on to the next match, which will be Shucklegigas versus Floss. Floss opting to use a Archaludon Dragon team, with Shucklegigas using a ground team featuring Garchomp, which we haven't seen a lot of in this tournament. Once again, this Dragon team seems to have Roaring Moon, an innovation that seems to be very popular lately, so let's see how this match goes. Oh, there's also a Dragonite on the Dragon team as well, which we don't see a lot of either. It's usually more common on flying, but we do see Draco Meteor dropped by the Dragon Bolt already, as the eject button on Clodsire will be used and bring in Landorus. Landorus will instantly use Gravity, as Clodsire will come back out and take an Ice Beam from Latios, KOing itself in the process, as we do see the reveal of Latios having a Life Orb. Excadrill coming in, Earthquake getting a very easy KO onto Hisuian Goodra, as Dragonite now comes out, and Hippowdon comes in. Hippowdon also using its eject button to get Garchomp in, and now Garchomp is free to use its Scale Shot, or its Draco Meteor, as it seems to be the mixed set instead. As we see Hippowdon get swapped in for the Garchomp, this time lacking its eject button, but still getting up that sand, which is very useful for Excadrill, as the Draco Meteor subsequently from Floss does not do anything, or does a decent chunk of damage to Mamoswine, as we do see the Body Press go and connect onto the Garchomp, sadly hurting Archaludon more than it would like, as the Draco Meteor from Garchomp misses onto the Roaring Moon prediction, which is going to be very rough for Shucklegigas, as that will result in him losing his Garchomp. Roaring Moon is still suffering a lot of chip damage from Garchomp's contact-based abilities, but it will get KO'd by a critical hit Ice Shard. I'm not sure how much that matters. I think it probably doesn't, depending on the set, but regardless, the Draco Meteor will be used on Archaludon onto the Landorus, as Landorus will be able to take it and set Gravity as a countermeasure, or not really a countermeasure, but as a response. Psyshock is used, and this is actually a good Psyshock because it not KOing Hippowdon here actually gives it another turn of not having sand on either Excadrill or anyone else on their team, as Excadrill now gets only one more turn to wreak havoc on Floss's team. Dragonite instantly coming out, and Landorus comes in. Oh, it was also good for stalling out Gravity as well, but Mamoswine is going to come in now. Icicle Crash getting that KO on the Dragon Bolt, as we'll probably see Archaludon come in. Earthquake is used, so it's actually not Choice Band, so that crit probably mattered. And we do see the crit from Floss on the Dragonite Extreme Speed, but unfortunately the crit is just not enough damage, and Mamoswine will take the W. Ground looking very powerful in this tournament, but Ground has always been capable of doing this stuff. It just seems to be getting very good matchups in this tournament specifically. But yes, Ground is just generally a pretty good type. And this Sand team is relatively hard to deal with, because Ground has always been like sort of like an understated, very good top tier type. That's always been really good in the metagame, but people just don't really like use it as much or pilot it as well as it could be piloted. So it is nice to see when people do properly pilot the type. It can be very dangerous, especially against meta dragon teams like this one. But as we've seen, Ground still has its weaknesses, so that is something to keep in mind as we see the progress of Ground in this tournament. But yeah, Well played, Shucklegigas. Let's move on to the next match. Now we have Leafium Z versus Leafeonlol. We have Leafium Z opting for another Roaring Moon Latios-centered Dragon team, as we see Leafeonlol use a Fairy team featuring Primarina and Mimikyu, interestingly enough. We haven't seen Mimikyu in a while, so this will be an interesting match for sure. Alright, so we see the lead from Primarina and Dragapult. Dragapult is not wanting to deal with Primarina, so he swaps into Goodra. Suing Goodra, getting its special attack lowered and taking a Moonblast, but it will get some HP back. Knockoff is used and removes the choice specs on Primarina, significantly weakening it, as we will see Klefki put up those spikes. Remember, hazards are one of Dragon's biggest weaknesses, so Heavy Slam will be used again, as Reflect is put up by the Klefki. Primarina coming in the second Heavy Slam. Protect is used by Leafium Z to stall out those Reflect turns and also heal himself at the same time, as Moonblast just keeps getting used by the Primarina, as it is easily able to take those Heavy Slams from the Suing Goodra. It is at very low HP now, and now without the screen it will get KO'd by this Heavy Slam. Iron Valiant now coming in. Iron Valiant getting a knockoff onto Latios. Latios unfortunately not getting KO'd. This Latios also having Life Orb. Seems to be popular, as Roaring Moon does come in. Klefki opting to swap in and take the Iron Head relatively easily. Klefki not having Light Clay though is going to make its screen significantly less impactful, or not less impactful, but less useful in the long run, as we do see Suing Goodra get off a good Heavy Slam. 2 layers of spikes brought down now on the side of Leafium Z, which will make it very hard for his Dragon team to deal with, as we do see a Foul Play get used. Heavy Slam is used again as Klefki is sacked. Iron Valiant coming in. Knockoff is used, but it will get protected by the Suing Goodra, as Balloon is actually brought by the Iron Valiant, as we do see close combat go through, get a decent amount of damage on Archaludon. Archaludon not being Choice Scarf means that Iron Valiant will get the KO here, as we do see Roaring Moon come out. Who will deal with the Iron Head? It will be Mimikyu this time around, as Mimikyu probably will also get KO'd by the subsequent, Iron Head. Now who will deal with the Iron Head? It will be Primarina, or not Primarina, Hatterene, as Trick Room is used, thankfully not getting paralyzed, and we will see Draining Kiss get used and heal Hatterene up to full. Protect will be used by the Goodra, but Leafeonlol of course predicts this Protect and uses Calm Mind. Psyshock is used, getting the KO onto Goodra, who is way too low from hazards and all the other Gibbets suffered this game, as the Draining Kiss is used on Dragonite. Now, what will Dragonite use to try and KO the Hatterene? It will try to use Earthquake, but Trick Room will be used instead. Extreme Speed coming a little too short of KOing the Hatterene, as Hatterene will recover a ton of its HP back with Draining Kiss. Dragapult now coming in, and that was a very well played play by Leafeonlol to use a Trick Room again instead of trying to just go for the KO, as using a Trick Room again allowed it to outspeed the Dragapult, resulting in Leafeonlol's victory, because the Dragapult could have possibly made it a little bit difficult for Leafium Z to win, but thankfully that is not what happened due to this play. So well played to Leafeonlol. Unfortunately, we didn't really get to see what Mimikyu was able to offer this game. Mimikyu typically tends to run Sword Stance Life Orb sets, or even, well, back in Gen 7 it used to use Z moves all the time, but in modern day, I think it's usually exclusively Life Orb. Maybe it had a choice item. Usually it doesn't, though. It could also have been Red Card or something, but that I don't think it was Red Card because of the fact that it took the Iron Head and didn't do anything. So, kind of curious of what that Mimikyu was trying to do, but unfortunately we didn't get to see it. It just ended up doing its job and being a good second to Iron, or not Iron, but Roaring Moon. So, very unfortunate. But yeah, Leafeonlol will take that W and give Fairy another win. Just proving that Fairy, even though it started off really bad, has been doing its best to try and come back into the game. So, yeah, well played by Leafeonlol, and now let's move on to the next match. Froll versus Royal. Oh, I almost got PTSD there, I'm not gonna lie. But thankfully, neither of them are using a flying team, so this match will probably not take over 500 turns. But yes, this matchup instead will be a Dark team on Royal's side with what's it? Hoopa Unbound and Tinglu, while Froll will be using a balanced water team using Walking Wake, interestingly enough, along with Milotic. So can't wait to see how this goes, because Froll's team is actually quite interesting. Opting to use Walking Wake probably being used due to actually probably not because of fire, because water already does decently into fire even with all the stuff fire has against it, but I guess this is a nice insurance policy as well. But Walking Wake also just has a really good speed tier and has decent special attacks, so it could be getting used for that as well. But yeah, also, yeah, another Dark team with a Roaring Moon who typically isn't seen in tournament a lot. Actually, no, it's seen a lot more on Dark. It's on Dragon where it's a lot more rare. But yeah, let's just see how this goes. Also, both sides are using Hisuian Samurott, so this is probably going to be brutal. Toxapex leads against the Masskeauuu as we do see the instant Toxic laid out and hit, connecting onto the Hisuian Samurott on Royal's side. Ceaseless Edge is used instantly as Infestation is now used by the Toxapex, locking in Hisuian Samurott and forcing it to slowly die, as Royal does unfortunately miss a Ceaseless Edge. Potentially, yeah, it will actually cost him a Singular Spike, which could have very bad ramifications on the rest of this game, as he will succumb to the Infestation plus Poison. Tinglu now coming out and using Earthquake immediately. Toxapex just going to use Toxic anyway, as we probably will see. Oh, no Stealth Rock, as we do see Hoopa come out instead, and Swampert will take that chip damage from Spikes. Knockoff will get rid of the leftovers, as Swampert will now get the Stealth Rock off. Samurott, Hisuian Samurott opting to use Ceaseless Edge now, as U-turn is used by Royal's Mandibuzz. And Masskeauuu will now come in. Masskeauuu looking to wreak some havoc on Froll 1's water team as Flower Trick comes through. It will be enough to a KO Toxapex, but Toxapex will swap out, as Swampert is now going to perish. Will Masskeauuu also be Thunder Punch, though, is the question. That is what we must know, as Tinglu will come in to check the Walking Wake, or to try to take a hit from it, as the Draco Meteor does not do any doesn't do a ton of damage to the Tinglu, as the Walking Wake is swapped out for Liverpond Wellspring, as Royal potentially may have tried to predict this, and switches into Roaring Moon, getting the U-turn off, as the superpower is used by Froll, but to no avail. Mandibuzz going to use Foul Play against Toxapex. U-turn is used, and will bring in the Hoopa Unbound, as Froll will use some recover on his Toxapex to bring it back to full HP. Thunderbolt is used, and Thunderbolt is just free to use now that Swampert is KO'd, and Froll's only electric immunity is gone. Roaring Moon coming out as U-turn is used, Froll 1 responding with a Milotic Alluring Voice onto the Mandibuzz. Alluring Voice bringing Mandibuzz to dangerously low HP, but unfortunately just coming up short of getting that to a KO, as we do see Flip Turn used by Froll 1's Milotic to bring in Toxapex. Mandibuzz on Royal's side will be using Roost to heal itself to near full as Toxapex comes in. Hoopa Unbound now coming in, getting infested by the Toxapex, as Toxapex likely cannot stay in. Yeah, Toxapex will swap out as Okabon and Wellspring will be put in and get KO'd. Hisuian Samurott staying in and with its heavy duty boots not taking any hazard damage, as Mandibuzz will use U-turn. Royal seemingly very stubborn about wanting to get rid of the hazards, as he knows that the hazards are the thing helping him against Froll's team, as Thunderbolt will come through on the side of Royal, getting the KO onto Milotic and slowly whittling down Froll 1's team, but as he's whittling down Froll 1's team, Royal's Hoopa is getting whittled down as well due to Toxic Poison and the hazards, as the Dragon Pulse will come through on the Walking Quake, but fail to KO the Tingaloo, as another one will have to be used. Mandibuzz now coming in. Mandibuzz taking the Dragon Pulse, but it will take a ton of damage, as 41% it will be left at. Roaring Moon coming in again, this time probably for the last time, as 43% damage will be done to the Toxapex. This time 37, as the Confusion will go off. Recover is used by Toxapex, and unfortunately the Confusion will hit Roaring Moon. And now Toxapex remains at 100% HP. And Roaring Moon will hit itself with Confusion again, as Recover is used. Ubon Bound now coming out, as Psychic Noise will come through, preventing any Black Sludge healing from the Toxapex. With its Dying Breath, Hoopa will try to get a big break in this game, as Meowscarada will now come in. Now, depending if on Roaring Moon actually very likely is going to be Choice Scarf. Or, sorry, not Roaring Moon. Walking Wake is going to be Choice Scarf, as the Hydro Steam will come through. Meowscarada just too low to really take that, as Walking Wake will come in and try to get the KO on Mandibuzz. Mandibuzz able to survive it, but for how long? As I don't think there's enough Roost uses for it to potentially wall out the Walking Wake completely. Hydro Steam being a 100% accurate move if I'm not mistaken, so it's not like Furl 1 can exactly miss here. Hydro Steam keeps getting used, as the Toxic is laid down. Mandibuzz looking to still try and keep walling the Walking Wake, as the Toxic timer keeps ticking down slowly. Mandibuzz using its final Roost to try and get the KO. Walking Wake will be KO'd, but how will this 1v1 go between Toxapex and Mandibuzz? Toxapex using its Recover, Toxapex now having one Recover use left, as the Toxic will connect, and I think that should be game, because there's no way Mandibuzz wins this 1v1. So, yeah, Furl 1 will win, and a pretty close match. Very well played by both sides. It is unfortunate those Confusion hits were unfavorable to Royal. Had Royal been able to get more Confusion hits, it probably would have been... Mandibuzz probably still wouldn't have been able to KO, but it's still very likely it would have not led to Meowscarada having to KO itself very early. And Mandibuzz could have instead come in to do some damage, but it is what it is. That is how Pokemon is sometimes. And with that being said, let's move on to the next match. Not much to comment on either team. Either seemed like it was relatively standard on both sides, or at least standard sets. Royal's team is definitely a little bit unconventional for a Dark team, but it's still relatively standard, so it's not that crazy, I would say. And Froll's team is actually very interesting. You do see how the Walking Wake basically allows it to not lose the Dark matchup instantly the second Meowscarada comes on screen, because due to his typing, or Walking Wake's typing, it doesn't get one-shot by either Meowscarada, Flower Trick, or Thunder Punch, which is all you really need, because it just needs to click one Draco Meteor to bring Meowscarada down to low HP, and then the Spike will do the rest, or a priority move that you have on your team will do the rest. Yeah, Walking Wake just is a very good mon for Dark specifically due to the existence of Meowscarada. So that is actually a very good bring by Furl 1, and it paid dividends in this matchup, because had he not had that, this would have been very hard for Furl 1 to deal with. So well played. Alright, next up we have Real Vidal versus Eternal Spirit. Eternal Spirit bringing a flying team, relatively standard as well, while Real Vidal is opting for a semi-standard dragon team, this time bringing Roaring Moon. alongside Dragon Knight, which is definitely something I haven't seen before. So let's see how this goes. Gliscor is led off against the Raging Bolt, as Toxic is instantly used by Eternal Spirit. Draco Meteor, unfortunately, one-hit KOing the Gliscor from full, so that very likely means that Raging Bolt is Specs. Landorus will put down the Stealth Rock, as Ice Beam is used by Vidal's Latias onto the Tornadus. Latias revealed to have Expert built, as the Ice Beam does a 38% to the Tornadus this time, as Gudra comes in, revealing Qwily onto the Tornadus, who uses U-turn to bring Landorus in. Tornadus is brought back in, however, and likely will be swapped out again. No, this time it goes for a knockoff and tries to remove the Gudra's leftovers, which it does successfully. Knockoff is used and removes the Tornadus' Assault Vest, as Tornadus will U-turn into Corviknight this time. Knockoff being used by Vidal's Gudra, as the Rocky Helmet from Corviknight will get removed. U-turn will be used and bring in Tornadus, as Heavy Slam is used by the Suing Gudra and brings Tornadus to dangerously low HP. Tornadus, however, is going to use U-turn again, as the Corviknight will swap in. Dragon Tail this time coming out on the Corviknight, as it will bring in Articuno. Eternal Spirit may be going to switch here. It does use U-turn, which pops the balloon on Archelodon, as Landorus now comes in. Landorus uses Earth Power, but unfortunately Latias is immune, as Eternal Spirit is probably going to look for a switch into Articuno. Archelodon denying that Articuno from doing anything though, as Tornadus will come back through, giving Archelodon a defense boost with its stamina ability. Corviknight now staying in, Flash Cannon being used but not doing a ton to Corviknight, as Thunder Wave is followed up, and Corviknight uses Roost to heal itself to full. The Paralysis, however, will definitely be a brutal indicator of this game, as we have seen the power of Paralysis in that Dragon Knight game when it got stunned 3 times in a row. Back to this game, however, Tornadus is now going to take a Flash Cannon from the Archelodon, as another defense boost will be brought onto Archelodon due to U-turn. Corviknight coming in to take another Flash Cannon, as we see Body Press finally get used. Roost is used by Eternal Spirit, as Corviknight is at a dangerously low HP, and now it gets U-turned, and it needs to remove rocks, otherwise Corviknight is effectively KO'd for the rest of this match. Landorus comes in, Earth Power is used, and Vidal now gets free reign to do whatever it wants next. As Ice Beam is used, but Articuno obviously takes very little damage from it. Articuno opting to use Freeze Dry not doing that much damage to Suing Gudra. As we do see Articuno use the U-turn into Corviknight. Corviknight now gets KO'd by the rocks. Heavy Slam fails to connect. Suing Gudra using Protect to try and protect the Enamorous move, as we do see Enamorous use Moonblast. Moonblast gets the KO on Archelodon. And we see Roaring Moon come out. Roaring Moon is Choice Scarf, so the Iron Head will get the KO on Enamorous. As we do see the Iron Head get continually used on Landorus, a lucky flinch coming through, actually saving Vidal a lot of HP on his Roaring Moon, as we see the Articuno now come out. Iron Head getting a flinch on Articuno too, and yeah, just like that. Eternal Spirit did lose due to inactivity, but I'm very, very positive when I say this. Eternal Spirit was not going to win this game from this current standpoint, because Articuno is at too low of an HP, and Tornadus definitely is probably incapable of taking 2 Iron Heads from... Yeah, it's definitely incapable of taking 2 Iron Heads from Roaring Moon at this HP, even if it swaps. So he either loses Articuno, and then puts in Tornadus, who has to try and kill the entire team that Vidal has, which includes a full HP Raging Bolt, or he swaps out Articuno and then also gains nothing because his Tornadus gets 2 KO. Yeah, it's very unlikely that Eternal Spirit can win from this position. So well played to Vidal, actually, because this team actually put on a lot of pressure on the flying team in a way that very few and he did it without using Raging Bolt that much, because Raging Bolt got toxic, and it never showed up for the rest of the game. But the threat of Raging Bolt forced Eternal Spirit to play a certain way, and due to the threat of Raging Bolt, Vidal was able to pilot his Latias and Roaring Moon in ways that allowed him to get the W. And those flinches at the end were definitely helping a lot. So, yeah. Big W by Vidal, even with some luck attached, but let's move on to the next match. Alright, Losco versus LBN. We have a Ghost team versus a Steel team. Steel team with Caesar, and a Ghost team with Pengairxan, and also Sinistra. And also, Sui and Zora. This might be tricky, because if LBN is very practiced with this team, he would probably try and do at least one fake out with the Zora, but most people usually don't go for it, so we'll see how this goes. As he tries to load. Spectrier is not Spectrier, and it's actually Zora instead, as we do see the Choice Scarf revealed on the Heatran as Fluttermane comes out. Shadow Ball is used, and Iron Treads is going to lose its Air Balloon, as it will get to a KO very easily. Fluttermane chooses to stay in to the Caesar, as Pengairxan will now come out. Bullet Punch doing very little damage to it due to its high defense stat. As we do see Gholdengo come in as well. Gholdengo taking a Shadow Ball. Gholdengo retaliating with its own Shadow Ball that crits Dragapult, but it didn't really need the crit to win that in particular. Shadow Ball is being used as Overheat is used by Losco in an attempt to try and get Spectrier low, which it succeeds in, but Spectrier will still get a Grenade boost. Caesar now coming in to try and get a Revenge Gale with Bullet Punch, but to no avail, as we do see Sinistra come out again. Or not again, but yeah. Fluttermane opting to use Shadow Ball, as Brave Bird is used, unsuccessfully getting a KO on Fluttermane, as we do see Corviknight barely live a Shadow Ball from the Fluttermane. As we do see a subsequent Shadow Ball brought up, and the special defense drop will make it so that Losco has to choose either to sack the Corviknight or to put in someone else, and he chooses to put in someone else, that someone else being Arcaladon. As we do see the leftovers reveal, and now Arcaladon is going to fall. Caesar is going to come in now. Caesar going to be answered by Sinistra, except Corviknight gets doubled in to deal with the Sinistra instead. Sinistra opting to use its Calm Mind. I thought it was going to be the Weakness Policy set for a second there, but it did not use Weakness Policy, so thankfully you don't have to worry about that. Curious what this item is though, as the Sinistra will be using a ton more Shadow Balls. Brave Bird is used, and now Fluttermane comes in. Shadow Ball is used, and crit will go through on the Gholdengo, as we do see Caesar come out again. Caesar just putting in way too much pressure against the Ghost team, as Ghost does not have a really solid way of answering it outside of Pengairxan. And we do see Pengairxan get the Shadow Ball onto Corviknight, as well as the special defense drop. Caesar coming in to predict maybe the potential double into Fluttermane, but unfortunately LBN chooses to stay in. And parting shots into Fluttermane. Looks like LBN might be trying to be a bit mean. As we do see the Shadow Balls keep going through. But a special defense drop coming in again. As it looks like LBN might be trying to soften up Corviknight as much as possible with its Pengairxan before putting in Fluttermane to try and finish it off. Which is the right thing to do, because Corviknight could win from this spot if LBN played a bit more poorly, but thankfully LBN is locked in and is trying his best to win this match, as Bulk Up is used again by the Corviknight, this time getting ×3 defense, 2.5 times attack. Shadow Ball used again, but Roost is used again by the Corviknight. Wrist uses are at 2, as Pengairxan uses Shadow Ball yet again. Once again lowering its special defense. Corviknight Knight once again using Bulk Up. As we now get the crit that KOs the Pengairxan. Amphibien says, I'm sorry, but to be truthful, I'm pretty sure he was going to win anyway, due to the fact that Corviknight can't get rid of the minus special defense stats. Like, he was like minus, I think it was -3 at that point. And at -3, I'm pretty sure if he was like at roughly 60 to 70%, Fluttermane should just KO with a Shadow Ball. So, yeah, it is what it is. And that's assuming that Fluttermane doesn't also just have Thunderbolts or some other move that can KO Corviknight way better than Shadow Ball. But yeah, that will be it for that match. Now let's move on to the next. Amphibien's Ghost team is actually quite nice to see. And Pengairxan proving itself as a really good physical wall, especially into stuff like Caesar. Caesar kind of obliterated this Ghost team had it not been for Pengairxan and its good defensive qualities. So, yeah, very good. What a nice game for Ghost to have. And let's move on to the next match. Next match will be Qwily versus Fusien. Qwily opting for a Steel team with Aesir and Gudra, and Fusien opting for a standard ground team. Looks like we're going to be seeing this particular ground team a lot this tournament, but let's just see how this goes. So we lead with Skarmory and Landorus. Landorus instantly using Gravity as Excadrill comes in. Skarmory will be taking a ton of damage, but Excadrill will be brought to 11% HP, which is actually really good for Qwily, as we do see Gudra fall. Iron Treads comes in, but once again, it perfectly outspeeds the Excadrill. So we lose the Choice Scarf on Great Tusk again. I feel like we've seen this before, but Gholdengo will get KO'd by the Headlong Rush, as Gravity is now gone. Archaludon will come in, as Hippowdon will take a hit, eject button being used to instantly put in Landorus once again, as the Gravity will likely be used. Gravity is used. Ice Spinner will be used onto the Great Tusk, who does not take a lot of damage from it. Archaludon will be taking a Headlong Rush from the Great Tusk. Likely could survive another one? No. It does not end up surviving this one, as the Headlong Rush will KO the Archaludon. Heatran is brought in. Fusien maybe suspecting that it is Choice Scarf Heatran, which is why it's swapped out. As Skarmory is going to be put in and try to get a couple of spikes off. But Fusien is in just way too good of a position in this game, as Hippowdon will come out again. Ice Spinner is used, not doing a ton of damage to Hippowdon, and Qwily will be forced to swap out into Skarmory. Excadrill is put in, but does perish to the singular spike that is left on the field, as Landorus now comes in and also takes damage from spikes due to Gravity. Skarmory is now gone, but Iron Treads still remains, as it is faster than Landorus. Hippowdon coming in again to tank the Ice Spinners. Ice Spinner being used again by Qwily. Fusien trying to keep Hippowdon alive, as it sets up the Stealth Rock to try and soften up Heatran. Slack Off will be used again. This time Earthquake is used by the Iron Treads, as Whirlwind is used. Yeah, Iron Treads actually seemingly completely walls the Hippowdon, due to the fact that it has Balloon and Hippowdon only has Earthquake as an attacking move, so it's basically immune to everything it does. Flamethrower is used, Hippowdon is KO'd. And now we see Landorus. Landorus will be taking a ton of damage. Gravity is used. Ooh, Gravity actually being very crucial for Fusien to use here, due to the fact that, actually, no. Now, Iron Treads is not immune, because Balloon cannot activate. And the Balloon pops as well, even though it wasn't activated. So now, Landorus can stay in, or go in. Earthquake is used. Mamoswine is brought to low HP, but Iron Treads is now also KO'd to that low HP. But can Clodsire, and I just want to take down this Heatran with Choice Scarf. We shall see. Clodsire at full HP, or somewhat full HP. Takes very little damage from the Flamethrower. And the Earthquake will connect and KO the Heatran. Well played to both sides. This is a very close and tight match. But yeah, Fusien was just able to clutch up and get that final to get those few kills. For Qwily, considering Qwily's position in that game, they played extremely well trying to climb back and get into a spot where they could win, and they were almost there, but unfortunately they just barely came up short due to the fact that Iron Treads is just, well, Iron Treads carried this match, definitely, against the ground team, but Fusion's team was just far too strong and too much for it to deal with, so it is what it is, but well played to both sides in this match, honestly. This is a very well played match by both players. So good job to both players, but congrats to Fusion for winning. Now let's move on to the next match. Qwily versus Sificon. Sificon opting for a fighting team with Keldeo, of all things, and Qwily is opting for a steel team with Caesar. So relatively standard team on Qwily's side, but Sificon is using a relatively interesting team. Instead of using Urshifu Rapid Strike, he's opting to use Keldeo instead, which I find very interesting, because Keldeo is not used very often on fighting these days. So let's see what Sificon is cooking up here. Skarmory is led into Iron Hands, as Skarmory uses Spikes immediately. Iron Hands uses Sword Stance and is already big scary. Skarmory will take a ton of damage from the Thunder Punch, but will Whirlwind out the Iron Hands, as Gallade will take 12% from those Spikes. We see Archaludon come in and take the knockoff from Gallade as it loses its leftovers. Gholdengo will come in, taking the very easily predictable Sacred Sword from Qwily, from Sificon, sorry, as Qwily will take the knockoff from the Gallade, as there will probably be a recovery here from Qwily. Yes, indeed. Hex is used by Qwily, but a Drain Punch is used to try to predict something on Sificon, as Sificon will try to keep using Thunder Punch on the Gholdengo. Gholdengo opting to spam Recover to keep itself healthy, but has to be careful with the Thunder Punch paralysis, as Hex will KO the Iron Hands. Here comes Keldeo. Keldeo using Surf and getting a KO on the Skarmory. Archaludon comes in and uses Draco Meteor on the paralyzed Gallade. What will Gallade do? Gallade will get paralyzed and do absolutely nothing. So now Gholdengo comes in and clicks Recover again to keep itself at full HP. Qwily opting to stay in and do a little bit of damage to Great Tusk. Great Tusk taking a ton of damage and staying at 5% HP, as Iron Treads will come out. Iron Treads may be going to look to Rapid Spin here, and yes it does. But unfortunately it procs Sneasler's Balloon, so now it is faster, and Iron Treads will get KO'd by the close combat. Caesar now comes in, getting ready to check Sneasler, as Great Tusk KOs itself on a Spike. Bullet Punch does not do anything, as Keldeo is now brought in safely. Gholdengo unable to take the Surf, as it now falls. Heatran looking to be Scarf, so Gallade is put in instead. 2 Earth Powers will be enough to bring down Gallade, as Iron Valiant now comes in. Archaludon showing its face, but going to get 2-hit KO'd by the Iron Valiant unless Qwily opts to swap out, which he does not, so Archaludon will fall to the Iron Valiant. Caesar now comes in, threatening the Iron Valiant. Sneasler now coming in as a response to the Caesar, as it will fall to the Caesar. Keldeo comes in, and Keldeo's in a relatively good spot here, as it does a 1-hit KO the Caesar, and Heatran will follow suit. And there we go. A well-played game by Sificon, taking advantage of fighting's strength. Keldeo is typically a very common Caesar counter, but with Trailblaze being in this generation, it's very hard to consistently check it. But it seems like most high-level players don't seem to use Trailblaze on the Caesar, so If that is not an option that is being used, then water types against Caesar don't really have to worry about it that much. That being said though, Keldeo was definitely a decent pick here as a special attacker that could just do a ton of damage to Archaludon, as well as do a bunch of damage to Suian Gudra. Keldeo actually probably is one of the best breakers of the double steel jacket core, as it can afford to run Focus Blast and Secret Sword on the same set, and actually essentially hit both sides of the steel duality. So yeah, actually an interesting bring by Sificon here. Probably was expecting Dragon, but instead got Steel. Still was useful against Steel due to the fact that Steel has Archaludon, so it's very nice to have for that. And Surf Spam, it was very powerful against this team, especially with Hisui and Gudra. So yeah, well played by Sificon. Now let's move on to the next match. Adjustments versus Fentropy. Now, I know in the last video I'm slightly biased towards liking when Fentropy plays, but once again, Fentropy is opting to use a poison team. Looks like roughly the same poison team, but I think Salazzle might actually be new here, as he does bring the Weezing Galar again. Or no, Weezing Galar is actually common on this team. It's on Fairy where it's uncommon, but Salazzle is definitely an unusual pick by Fentropy here, as it is going against a meta-defining fire team from Adjustments. So let's see if Poison can hack it against a relatively oppressive type. Heatran is led immediately into the neutralizing gas Galarian Weezing, as we see an instant burn brought onto the Galarian Weezing. Strange Steam getting a balloon pop on the Heatran. We see Clodsire brought in as the Toxic Spike does go up. Galarian Weezing coming in, taking the Hypnosis pretty easily due to its burn, as Salazzle will come in. Salazzle taking a Flamethrower from the Ninetales, as we do see a Protect get used. Fentropy trying to stall out the Sun turns as much as possible, as the Toxic is used on the Ninetales. Salazzle now getting swapped out as we put in the Weezing, as it gets crit by the Flamethrower. Cerulege is put in, and U-turn is used. Cerulege will be getting a weak armor boost from it though, as Amoonguss is put in. Amoonguss will get one hit KO. Oh, not quite one hit KO by the Cerulege, as it does actually opt to get the KO on it. Very shocked it actually lives that, as Flamethrower is used to KO the Amoonguss. Now we have Clodsire in again, and one of its scariest checks is gone. Cinderace may be looking to court change here, as Salazzle is put in. Pyro Ball, unfortunately missing on the Cinderace, as the follow-up one does end up connect, but we'll see if that one extra turn of Sun will end up changing the outcome of this game, as we do see the Fake Out used immediately by Fentropy onto Cinderace, stalling out yet another turn of Sun. Close Combat is used, but it hits the Volcarona, and Volcarona does not get a Flame Body Burn, thankfully, but we do see the Muck come in now. Muck opting first for Black Sludge, as I think that one turn may have actually mattered. Or Heatran has Flame Body, so now Muck is burnt. Clodsire now coming in as the Flame, and that's going to be brutal because now Clodsire doesn't really effectively threaten a lot of the Pokemon on Adjustments' team anymore. Earthquake now going to do a ton of, not going to KO Heatran because it got burnt. Recover, bringing Clodsire back to relatively good HP, but it will not stay like this forever, as Heatran will now finally fall. And Fentropy still has to deal with Ogerpon Hearthblade, who will likely, if it has Trailblaze, this might be GG. Okay, it's not quite GG yet, but we will see Sneasler come in. Still has its balloon intact, as the Dire Claw will get the KO on Ogerpon. Ninetales now coming in as well. Ninetales cannot get slept by Dire Claw, but it doesn't matter since Sneasler will be opting to use that. And a Dire Claw sleep puts Volcarona to bed. And Volcarona doesn't even get a Flame Body burn to make up for it. As the close combat comes through, and Sneasler wins! Yeah. And this right here is the example of why Dire Claw is a very, very obnoxious move. Because Fentropy, by all means, should have lost this match. Right then and there. Because Volcarona was just going to live the Dire Claw and just Flamethrower Sneasler, and then he would win the game through either Cinderace or Volcarona doing damage. But instead, because of Dire Claw's funny secondary effect, Fentropy just wins. What a game. What a game Pokemon is. I mean, I really just can't say anything about that. The Fentropy team is pretty interesting. I like the Salazzle, but unfortunately it didn't really do much in this setting. That being said, though, I don't know. I mean, Neutralizing Gas of Weezing Galar is also pretty good into certain stuff. But yeah, in general, I just cannot believe that this mod just did that. But yeah. Unfortunate adjustments. Could have gotten a W, but instead he got Dire Clawed. But yeah, that is just how Pokemon is sometimes. So let's move on to the next match. Alright, we got Matt and Mellow 2 versus VK. VK opting for a Weavile Tinglu Dark Team, as Matt and Mellow is opting for a Galarian Slowking Poison Team. With Sneasler, so maybe we'll see another Sneasler moment in this game too. Hopefully not, but we'll see. Alright, as we lead with Mandibuzz and Muck. Mandibuzz using U-turn immediately into the Muck, as Tinglu comes in, taking the knockoff and losing its leftovers. Muck is going to get swapped out into Galarian Weezing, who will have Levitate this time around. Heavy Slam connecting onto the Galarian Weezing, but not doing a ton of damage, as the Will-O-Wisp does miss onto the Hoopa. Hoopa getting swapped out immediately for Tinglu, as Matt and Mellow swaps into Muck. Muck getting all of its HP back from leftovers, as Weezing is put back in to the Tinglu. Tinglu putting up rocks and now swapping into Hoopa, who now successfully gets burnt by the Weezing. Tinglu now coming back in, as Matt and Mellow swaps out into Alolan Muck. Alolan Muck now gets swapped into Weezing, as Heavy Slam is used by Tinglu. Pain Split is used, and heals Matt and Mellow to a relatively good HP. 36% is done to the Weezing with Heavy Slam, though, as Defog comes off and removes the rocks. Tinglu coming back in. VK looking like he wants to prevent the Tinglu from getting burnt to do enough damage to Galarian Weezing, as Galarian Weezing will come back out, and 41% will be dealt to the Weezing as Pain Split is used again. Heavy Slam trying to keep Weezing down as much as possible, as Tinglu will now finally get burnt, and Weezing will survive the subsequent Heavy Slam as a result. Weezing now leaving into P.E.K.K.A runs, who will now start setting up nasty plots, but the Whirlwind will prevent it from doing that, as Weezing will be brought in and lose a good portion of its HP. Stealth Rock will be removed by the Weezing Defog, as VK seems to be adamant on trying to keep them up. VK slowly dying to the burn, as Weezing just keeps defogging away the rocks. But VK will kill his Tinglu just to keep the rocks up. And now Hisuian Samurai is in, Weezing is forced to swap out, as Peckerant will come in. Razor Shell is used to try and KO the Weezing. As you do see the Malignant Chain, are we going to see some robbery here? Poison Puppeteer. And yes, we do see a hit. Recover is used. Thankfully, Cecil's Edge does go off this time. Samurai should recover from the confusion this turn, but it seems that Peckerant is faster. So Peckerant will get the KO onto Hisuian Samurai, as Weavile will come in and triple Axel Peckerant to KO, as Iron Moth comes to replace the Peckerant. Koopa coming in, taking a flamethrower, but not very well, as we do see the Iron Moth get swapped out immediately. Mandibuzz coming in. Mandibuzz knocking off the Muck that replaced the Iron Moth, as Poison Jab goes through, but not dealing a ton of damage. Muck also losing its only form of recovery in Black Sludge, so Mandibuzz is not. And Mandibuzz now gets poisoned by the Poison Jab, which is unideal. Luisin coming in as Weavile comes in as well. Weavile unfortunately only getting one kick of Triple Axle, as now the Stealth Rock and Spikes are gone. Triple Axle now finally getting the KO onto Luisin, but at what cost, as now BK does not have any rocks or spikes. Yaskarada now coming in, getting a powerful U-turn onto Muck. Muck now at dangerously low HP, as Mandibuzz will come in. Sneasler coming out, as a Roost is used by Mandibuzz. Sword Stance is used, as Foul Play is used by Mandibuzz. Popping the balloon and proccing the Unburden from Sneasler, as now Mandibuzz gets KO'd by this. But, thankfully, we do have Weavile, unless... No, he does not have a hand. Okay. So, Weavile does use the Ice Shard, and Mandibuzz, or not Mandibuzz, but Sneasler will fall. We see Galarian Slow King do a decent amount of damage to Weavile, as we see Iron Moth now come in. Triple Axle doing a ton of damage. Almost KOing the Iron Moth, but just barely coming up short. As the U-turn will get the KO onto Iron Moth, and I believe that may be game. That is game. Well played to VK, kept his cool during this match, and didn't quite fall off once he got hacked multiple times. But yeah, well played. And this is just an example of why a lot of people feel Poison isn't really viable, because it just kind of falls apart too easily. Especially to some of the common metagame threats, but honestly, Poison put up a really good fight here, so I wouldn't count out just yet. I think the teams just need to be refined a little bit more, or there needs to be some new tech found, but yeah, Poison is also really one of the haxiest types in this metagame, so it has that going for it as well, but yeah, I think even with its own tools, Poison is relatively scary. But yeah, that's it for this match. Now we have Sky versus Hammy358, as we do see Sky bringing a Roaring Boon Dragon team with Garchomp and Raging Bolt, and Hammy is using a Salamence Flying team. Now, I think we saw a Salamence Flying team before in MWP, and it was also just one, but I want to see what it does this time, because the one on that team had a Wish, so I think it's a defensive Salamence set. I wonder if it'll do something this match, now that it's not up against something with a Bolt Beam, or easy access Bolt Beam. We do see the instant Gliscor's Sword Stance immediately. Ice Fang, oh my goodness! The Ice Fang, Sword Stance, and Taunt, perfectly countering Sky's entire opening game plan, as we see the Draco Meteor from Sky's Dragon Ball come through, not quite getting the KO, or the Earthquake not quite getting the KO on the Dragon Bolt, as we do see Corviknight come out. Tornadus Therian now coming in to replace the Corviknight, as rocks are put up by the Archaludon. Getting the Draco Meteor off on Tornadus Therian, but not doing a ton of damage, as we do see the Iron Defense from Sky's Archaludon come through. Body Press getting a crit on the Salamence, as we see a Draco Meteor come out from the Salamence as well. Salamence is going to be swapped out, as Tornadus Therian tries to take a Shadow Ball from Dragon Ball. Unfortunately, the special defense drop will make it so that it cannot take another one, as Corviknight will now come in. Corviknight forcing out the Dragon Bolt, and Iron Head is used onto a very scary Raging Bolt, as it does get a Calm Mind off. U-turn is used by the Hammy as Gliscor comes out. Glasgow swaps into Enamorous to maybe try and predict the Draco Meteor, as now Hemi is trying to play mind games. Healing Wish is used, Salamence is fully healed. And now Sky, not knowing what this thing is going to do, is going to swap out. Draco Meteor doesn't do a ton of damage to the Hisuian Gudra, as we do see Skarmory come in with his Rocky Helmet and do a bunch of chip to the Dragon Tailing Hisuian Gudra. Defog is used by Hammy to remove those rocks from his team, as Leftovers is knocked off by the Hisuian Gudra. Dragon Tail is used. Salamence comes in again, as Corviknight now also comes in. Dragon Tail is used, and Gliscor is dragged out. Looks like Hemi might be trying to stay into Gliscor here, as the Earthquake does do a ton of damage. Corviknight is in. Iron Head is used, but unfortunately it will not be doing that much damage, as we do see a Thunderbolt brought in. Raging Bolt getting shockingly low, as it is swapped out for Hisuian Gudra. It looks like this is a mixed event set in 2026. Wow, I never thought I'd see this again. But yeah, we do see a Corviknight try to come in and take the Shadow Ball, but to no avail. As we see the Salamence come out again. Shadow Ball is used, and Draco Meteor does get the KO onto the Dragon Bolt, but now the big boss is here. Roaring Moon does take a lot of damage from the thing, as we do see Salamence come out. Thunderbolt will be enough to KO it, as Gliscor now comes in. Roaring Moon coming out, as we do see the Earthquake do a decent amount of chip damage. Skarmory getting hard swapped into, as now he's at the mercy of, and unfortunately he couldn't get that predict. So, yeah, the Earthquake does get used. Now it is a matter of whether or not Roaring Moon can KO the Gliscor, and it cannot, and that will be a W for the Salamence flying team from Hammer. And the Salamence actually did work this time. Now, it doesn't look like this one was the same one as the other one. It doesn't look like it was a Wish set. This seemed to be an actual, deliberate, offensive mixed set. A mixed set, which has been used in a while. I don't even think it's been used in Monotype that often, period. But yeah, the mixed mets actually did do good work here. It uniquely was able to threaten Raging Bolt on the switch with both of its moves in Dragon Meteor and Earthquake, and it was also able to somewhat break through Hisui and Gudra as well, due to it having an Earthquake. Now, I'm not sure which item it was. I think it might have been choice locked, but yeah. Apparently, the Healing Wish from Enamorous was worth putting onto the Salamence, because it brought us to this point in the match where Hammy was able to cinch out a win just barely. And yeah, that'll be that for that match. That is just a very well played match and a very interesting team from Hammy. One of the most interesting teams brought so far. So yeah. And it's also one of Flying's few W's, so this was definitely one of the most earned ones, I would say. Yeah, let's move on to the final match, which will be Sagazinha versus Pengairxan. Peng is using a fighting team with Breloom, of all things. Breloom hasn't been used a lot this generation. Typically, it's a very good Pokemon in Monotype fighting, but this generation, it's fallen off quite a bit, and funnily enough, one of the reasons is because of mods like Goldango, which is able to take its Spore relatively easily. Because, as a reminder, Sleep moves are not banned in Monotype, so Spore is actually a thing that Breloom can use, and it's still not doing well, so yeah, that'll tell you all you need to know about it. But yeah, Sagazinha will be using its Steel team, relatively standard as well, double Bird Seal, and Pengair is using the standard fighting team, but this time with Breloom over something like Urshifu. So let's see how this goes. We see the instant lead in Iron Hands, and the instant swap into into a Gallade, as Gallade instantly gets tricked by the Gholdengo, who puts its choice specs on it. Iron Hands coming in. Roost is going to be used by Discarmery, as we do see Iron Hands click Sword Stance. Whirlwind is used instantly, as we do see Gallade get dragged out. Great Tusk knocks off the Skarmory's Rocky Helmet before trying to go and use Rapid Spin, as Skarmory does use Roost on the Rapid Spin. Great Tusk looking to 1v1 the Skarmory in this hazard battle, as the Rocky Helmet is revealed. Now this time, Iron Hands comes out and does a decent chunk of damage to Skarmory, and this might be the best person to have swapped in to that Whirlwind by the Skarmory, as Skarmory is going to keep using its Roost. Iron Hands will come out again, Spikes will be used by the Skarmory again, Thunder Punch will be used again, and Whirlwind will be used again, as Gallade is instead brought out. Gholdengo now coming in, as Sacred Sword is used, but to no avail against Gholdengo, as we do see a Shadow Ball get the KO onto the Gallade. Shadow Ball is used again, and this time Sword Stance is used by the... Ooh, but the Earthquake will not hit, but thankfully Skarmory does not have its Rocky Helmet, so it can actually afford to hit it with a Drain Punch and not lose much for it. However, the Shadow Ball will get KO. Crit does not matter, it's +2. Iron Hands, that thing is going to KO that thing regardless. But, yeah, charge it. Yeah, unfortunately, Shuka Berry is not enough to keep Iron Hands healthy in front of the Iron Treads, as we do see the Iron Valiant come out and get a KO onto the Heatran. Sagazinha down to his last 3 mons, as Archaludon will come out. Great Tusk is going to face off against the Archaludon, as the Flash Cannon is used. It is, yeah, likely going to be a Choice Scarf set, as we do see Iron Treads come in. Sword Dance is used by Paying, as Ice Spinner is used. A greedy second Sword Stance is used, as Mach Punch will now come through. Now, is it faster than Corviknight? It should be if it's Jolly. But, oh! Doesn't even need to be faster. It just KO'd it with Mach Punch at +4. And just like that. Just like that. Breloom was able to get the KO. Get the KOs it needed to win the game. And yeah, that's what Breloom used to do a lot of, but it's just fallen off a lot because of all the stuff that stops it. But Peng didn't even use Spore in this match, which is interesting because that's usually the reason you use Breloom. But Breloom is also unique because it is technically one of the fastest quote-unquote attackers on fighting, because of the fact that it uses, you know, Mach Punch, which is a priority move over stuff like Urshifu or Sneasler even, who are just decently fast, but they can still get outsped by a lot of stuff in the metagame, especially in this generation with Pokemon with over 400 speed running around. But yeah, Breloom can uniquely just not have to deal with any speed tiers because of Mach Punch. Now granted, it still has a horrible matchup against Ghost types, but against Sagazinha's team specifically, Breloom was pretty decent. So, well played to Peng for bringing the Breloom. Breloom definitely did uniquely win the match there, since I think other mons in its position would not have been able to step up to the plate as much. But I definitely do think that Breloom was definitely good here, for sure. Because Urshifu would have had some weird stuff to deal with Archaludon. And then, not even to mention that it would have to be forced to be Punching Glove, otherwise it would get absolutely rocked by Skarmory. So, yeah. This was just really nice meta call by Pengairxan. And, yeah, that'll be it for this video. So, conclusions to draw from this week. Once again, Roaring Moon is on the rise on Dragon. We didn't see a ton of Dark this match, and Ground has been winning a ton. So maybe we'll start seeing some more anti-ground tech next week, especially since next week is going to be a make or break week for a lot of teams. We shall see, we shall see, we shall see. But yeah, with that being said,
I will see you guys in the next video. Take care.